Hi, my name is Stephanie, and today I'm going to answer apparently a question a lot of you have, and that is how I got my autism diagnosis. Now, I did a video talking about my time going to a doctor to get an autism diagnosis referral or a referral to go see about a diagnosis, etc. And I had actually thought I had actually gone over this, but what happened was I was telling the story, but it kind of ended up becoming about mental health, and so I actually ended up talking about it mostly in my experience with depression video, and so obviously a lot of people wouldn't know where to look to find that, so I'm making this specific video for you guys. So if you want to know the story of basically how I got to the point of having a referral, how I had to go to the doctor first, and that whole experience, you can check that out. I will leave it in a card. So basically, what happened was I ended up getting a referral to a mental health place, basically a group that had multiple like psychologists, etc. on staff, and they were basically like a mental health hospital, but the outpatient portion. And that is kind of where all of that started. So I went in for my first appointment, which was called an intake. At the time, I did not know what that meant, and I had known people who had actually been admitted to the same mental health hospital as inpatient, so I was like, whoa, you know, like I thought they were trying to have me voluntarily like commit myself or something, and so they had to explain what an intake was. And basically an intake is where they intake all your information, right? So they find out about you, why you want counseling or why you want therapy or why you're there, etc. They, of course, make you fill out all these forms and all that sort of stuff, and it was a very emotional visit. I was placed with a psychologist who was a male, and apparently I don't speak well to males, at least not as easily to females, and I found that out through therapy when I was trying to talk to him. Basically, they had me go through a bunch of questions. They kind of had almost like a question tree, right? So they'd ask you a question, and if you said yes, it would kind of like open these other dialogues to ask more questions, and if you continued to answer in certain ways, you know, it would keep going deeper. Whereas if you said no, it would just kind of go to the next thing. Basically, they're trying to figure out what your issues are. So obviously I told them why I was there. I was, you know, wanting to talk about a possible autism diagnosis, and I don't even think I initially mentioned depression and anxiety, which I had a feeling. The reason that this recollection had ended up turning into basically a mental health story was exactly kind of how the appointment went. So they were like, okay, you know, this is why you're here, but they were really wanting to follow this script thing to fill out all the information for the intake. They wanted like very definitive answers, which was really hard for me. I was feeling really uncomfortable. I was like doing full on like arm twists and everything because of how like how unwell I was feeling being there and how uncomfortable I was. And I also was so scared that they were just going to dismiss me, but I decided like, okay, I'll just answer their questions, and I'm sure that eventually we'll get around to it. We ended up going down things about depression, and that very much concerned them. So basically they wanted to address problems with depression and anxiety before they even touched autism, because they were actually in fear for my life, and so they wanted to get that sorted out first. They did say that, you know, we'll talk about the rest later. There are definitely some things they had kind of mentioned, like, and there's some things for concern there, but I want to, you know, handle your issues with depression and anxiety first. And so that kind of went through this whole emotional thing, had follow-up appointments, etc. And then through that, I ended up getting asked again, like, okay, so why are you here, blah, 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 blah. And I told them again, you know, like, this is why I'm here. This is why I think that. And I didn't really get to tell them, you know, all the things, right? They were just like, okay, well, did this and this happen in your childhood, you know? Did you have issues with needing an IEP? Did you have learning difficulties? Do you know if your mom or dad remember you not meeting certain milestones? And so they were starting to ask me more stereotypical questions while obviously observing me as I was sitting in front of them. And so they asked me a lot of questions about things to do with sensory sensitivities and kind of the way I was thinking and if I was okay with change. And they kind of started almost doing an altered version of my intake with all these questions that actually did pertain to autism rather than focusing maybe on the depression and anxiety as my actual intake had. They did put an emphasis on anything from childhood, so I started recounting a lot of the things that I had talked to my sister about, and then also things that I personally remembered and stuff like that, and also how, you know, why I was there actually wanting a diagnosis, because it was distressing for me. And a lot of times if it's not bothering you, therapists don't bother giving you a diagnosis, or psychologists for that matter rather. And so basically we had that conversation. They said, you know, if it makes you feel better, I will let you know that I would be on the side of yes, but we'd like to get to know you more first. You know, like not just be like, hey, you've been here a couple times, let me give you a diagnosis, right? So I had a few more sessions. I was with my initial psychologist a few times, and we kind of just talked about random stuff. It was really awkward. I don't think our conversation was well facilitated. I had a lot of trouble trying to understand what he wanted from me, I guess. Like, I didn't know how to answer his questions, and he seemed irritated when I didn't know how to answer him and stuff like that. And then I got a call rescheduling that next appointment with him, and I guess he had gone on leave for a while. Then I got placed with another psychologist who was female, and that went a lot smoother in our conversations and talking, and really talking about the concept of, like, you know, she was more on the side of like, well, why would you even want one, you know, like, why does it matter? And so I was trying to share, like, based on understanding and based on being able to have access to accommodations and things that I need. And so she was starting to become more understanding with that. So basically through collaboration between the person who is prescribing my medication and the original psychologist that I had talked to, as well as obviously the answers that I gave them, as well as observation and getting to know me over time, they were comfortable with giving me an ASD level 1 diagnosis. The explanation I was given was kind of interesting regarding diagnosis, and I think this is kind of interesting maybe for everybody, is the concept of diagnosis is usually almost kind of fluid. So she was saying that, for example, depression and anxiety, I might have those diagnoses, but they might not be forever. And she was like, well, you know, with autism, it doesn't usually change, you know. But she was just kind of letting me know that not necessarily like depression and anxiety are permanent. I believe for me, because I was dealing, you know, with my psychologist talking about it, it has been chronic through my life. But I mean, I'm fine with it wanting to go away on its own if it wants to do that. However, we went kind of over the implications of things and, you know, why diagnosis is appropriate for the situation and stuff like that. So, I mean, it wasn't as eventful as I imagined it would be. I know some people go through very long assessments, very formal long assessments, especially for children or those who are under the age of 18. When dealing with adults, especially in my area, a lot of times they're just trying to basically apply the concepts of what they would ask for like children and minors to adults. So they're trying to take that information from an adult's minor ages to apply to them as an adult, if that makes sense, because the criteria, the way that questionnaires are set up, the way that all that stuff is set up is designed for children and minors, because you assume that you would be able to catch that then. So it was very interesting. I know people have different experiences, even within the same area, within the same state, different experiences obviously across the country, depending on where you go. So it is a bit kind of messy when it comes to adult diagnosis. Now, I think in other countries, they may have it a little more formalized than they do here. It tends to be more formalized here when it comes to minors than when it comes to adults. A lot of times parents of autistic children will have their children, they get diagnosed, and then sometimes they can actually work with that psychologist for them to possibly diagnose them, because obviously you've just established that this child is autistic, which also now means there's a likelihood that one or both parents could be on the spectrum because of the genetic factor of autism. And of course they also asked me about those sorts of things, like if you know if anybody in your family is autistic, etc. So that was the whole thing. I think it was kind of anticlimactic because of how like traumatic it was coming off of the doctor referral, and really how a lot of my emotion and energy was really caught up in dealing with depression and anxiety, because they were very imminent things I had to deal with that I had kind of set aside. Like I was like, oh, I can deal with it, like it's not that bad. So if you want to hear me like be really emotional and talk about all of that particular part of my intake and stuff like that, I'll link you to it. But beware, it is very emotional, so if you don't like that kind of thing or don't want to hear that kind of thing, don't bother. It's okay. So I think a lot of that kind of just got lost in that. I think it's stupid that I have to defend my diagnosis, and I think that's interesting. I think the one way that has really given me confidence to come on here and share was that I got a diagnosis. Like, people can't just sit there and say you don't have autism. Funny thing, people can still sit there and try to say you don't have autism when you're diagnosed. And I've had people who listened to my story going to the doctor for a referral and thought that I was saying that was my diagnosis, and they were being really awful to me about it not being legit. And I'm like, that's not that's not what happened, but you know. So I thought I'd make this video to help clarify for some of you who were confused. I think it's interesting, again, that I feel like I have to defend myself or defend my diagnosis, which is the dumbest thing. I think people pick on anything they want to because they're bored with their life. I don't know, like, I don't know. All I know is my diagnosis was good enough to be a proof for my accommodations, and that's what I need it for, and that has to be legit for me to actually get accommodations through my college. So yeah. So there is the conclusion to the story that I started like a year or two ago on this channel about my journey, and I guess I just never had officially wrapped it up. So I apologize for that and the confusion that I guess it caused some of you. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and drop a like. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you have experience with intake appointments, if you want to share, you don't have to share if you don't want to, or how your diagnostic process went, or just whatever you want to talk about, as long as it's not mean, rude, etc. Put it in the comments. If you enjoy autism-related videos from me, you can hit that subscribe button. I upload to this channel every Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time.
Thank you to everyone who supports me here on YouTube as YouTube members, my patrons over on Patreon, and a special thank you to my Spaz Tier patron, Marie Johansson.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a wonderful week, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!